Welcome to CPF Fire Wire, a podcast from California professional firefighters where we discuss a wide range of issues affecting firefighters, our unions, our families, and the communities we serve.
Hi, this is Brian Rice, President of the California Professional Firefighters, coming to you with another CPF Fire Wire. And joining me on the podcast today from our 39th Senate District in the state of California is our pro tem of the Senate, Toni Atkins. And I will say this, I work with a lot of, we have a lot of relationships politically and we do things together. You meet people in life that every now and then you just make a connection. And Toni is one of those folks for me. We not only have a working relationship, we've been able to share some personal things and personal times, and it just adds to the depth of the business that we do. So Toni, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us today and just kind of talking about the issues that are facing California.
Well, Brian, thank you. And let me just say back at you. It's really great having you as a partner and working together through these difficult times. And, you know, it's really about relationships and how you connect. And so I appreciate you, and I really am looking forward to today.
Tell me a little bit about your journey into politics. How did Toni Atkins find herself as a senator in the state of California, and not just a senator, a leader of the Senate?
Well, Brian, I think, you're a leader if people let you be a leader and allow you that privilege. You know, I grew up, really pretty poor in substandard housing. Sometimes we didn't have running water. I watched my parents work harder than anyone that I've ever known, but still struggle to get by. And so, you know, in this day when we're looking at things like stimulus checks, I remember when my parents got one stimulus check decades ago and what it meant for us living paycheck to paycheck. You know, I come from a strong military family, although I could never serve because I was an out lesbian. All of my family members did, including my twin sister. So public service was a different kind of path that I could take and still have the ability to be part of something bigger than myself, something that growing up, I wasn't sure I would be allowed to be. You know, I didn't think society was really about me growing up in poverty. But, I moved to San Diego because my twin sister was in the Navy, and to support her and help her at that time. And I met Christine Kehoe, who really was the first open LGBT person elected at the San Diego City Council. And she really opened my eyes to what was possible for elected office, especially when it comes to things like constituent services. She encouraged me to step out from behind the scenes and to run for office after she termed out of city council. So I would say with her mentorship, and the mentorship of others like Karen Bass, who was a former speaker and who swore me in as speaker, I don't think I'd be where I am today without that kind of support. And she gave me this opportunity. I will forever be grateful. There's nothing like, as you know, and all of your members, there's nothing like the ability to be part of public service and to provide support to community and to people.
It's so interesting that, Toni, that you mentioned public service, and that whether you're doing it in public safety or you're doing it as an elected official, I think we all have a gene to be public servants in one fashion or another. Even you saying that, you know, I come from a long line of military, and being unable to serve because you were out as a lesbian woman in California. We know that that's not the case today, or it shouldn't be. But it's just, I find it fascinating that we're all geared in that service mode. No one bit of public service is more important than another. It all fits together as a team.
One of my favorite Martin Luther King quotes, he has so many, but the one I love the most is where he says, anyone can serve. You know, you don't need a master's degree or to serve. You need a heart that is willing. I paraphrase, but a heart that is willing and the desire. So I couldn't agree with you more.
I'm going to swerve just a little bit. And I want to talk about the LGBTQ community and what we've seen in our nation and kind of what we're seeing. And this is where I want to hit, because it's important not only as a society, but it's important in the fire service, as a fire service family and public servant leadership. How do we force, or how do we build a new attitude and a new recognition of each other based on who we are and the fairness and the justice that we all deserve? I would just love to pick your brain on that and get your thoughts. What's important? What do you think, as a high-level state leader and a member of the LGBTQ community, what do you think we should put in front of ourselves as importance?
I grew up in Southwest Virginia in a rural community, pretty conservative part of the state of Virginia. I grew up, in the church. My parents always sent us to church, whether they went or not. Of course, I came out at an early age, LGBTQ, which was in and of itself very difficult. Fortunately, I always had the love of my parents regardless. My parents always loved their kids. Didn't matter. You don't abandon family. But I would say I learned from that, because now I live in San Diego. San Diego used to be a little more conservative, so to speak. It's all relative. It didn't seem conservative to me coming from Southwest Virginia when I landed in San Diego. But I would say one of the things I've learned now at age 58 is that, we all have stories. And my story only matters in the context of how it connects to your story and where we can share. What is our shared experience? And are we going to really listen? Everybody says, one of the skills you need to have as a leader is to listen. But then we go on and we don't listen, many times. And I think more than anything, actively engaging and listening to what someone else has to say, and to hear them with an open heart. I know that sounds kind of, out there, but it's really true, because when you look at George Floyd and you look at what the African-American community has been telling us for hundreds of years, we need to hear each other. We need to listen better. And we need to understand that we all have some sense of blinders on. The phrases we use today are implicit bias or intersectionality. Where I come from, no one understood what intersectionality meant, but they knew what it meant to be poor and struggling with getting your children taken care of and a good education, and what intersectionality is, what implicit bias is. It just really means we need to be more mindful of our peers, of their experience, and understand that I may not understand your experience as a firefighter, much less a white man or whatever, however you identify. But I think listening to each other and understanding that we all have some blinders on, it maybe not intentionally, but we got to step back a little bit and make room for each other. I don't know if that answers your question.
It does. And this discussion so applies to today's fire service. It's a group of men and women. We are not as diverse as we need to be. Let's just not try to pretend that we are. We're not as diverse as we need to be. We're not as representative in gender, in orientation, in ethnicity. A big part of our success is exactly, Toni, what you just said. Stop and listen, and then be a part of that change. It all starts with you and the community that you live in. And I appreciate that. Those are such good words of wisdom.
But Brian, here's the struggle I think we have. How do we make space for others and not feel left behind ourselves? I think that's the dilemma of what we're facing today, that we all want to be part of something. And yet, it seems like we have to give some space away if we're to allow true equity and equality. And does that mean bad things for me as a Caucasian woman, where you don't see that there are enough Asian Pacific Islander women or African American women or whoever, is there enough room for all of us? And I have to say we're going to have to figure out how to say that there is room for all of us, whether it's the fire service or in elected office where we don't have parity representation between men and women. But how do we not leave anybody behind, and how do we not lose ground? And I think that's the fear. People react out of fear.
I'd take a step this way. We each have to make room. Where I'm not giving room or I'm not giving you, no, I need to make room. I need to make that space to bring others and to bring that diversity. When you make that space, you're rounding out and you're strengthening your abilities to do whatever your mission is. Fire service, policing, political. When you invite others to be a part of what you've been a part of, it enriches and it strengthens. This is a conversation that has to happen. And what better time? And, I will say this, and I'm going to take advantage of the moment. The CPF has, we've just begun to institute a human relations commission so that we work with every gender, orientation, ethnicity, include and be inclusive of all members that potentially could enter the fire service as a profession. And I'm already going to tap you to be kind of a special liaison for me. I think it would just be great. Your leadership position, your life's experiences, you could add a lot of oversight leadership if you were willing to consider that. I would love to have you be a part of that.
Well, thank you. I would love to be in. I was on the city council in San Diego when we hired our first woman fire chief, Tracy Jarman. And I might be a little off, but I think she joined in 1985, and she never forgot the story of standing in line to register or whatever the process was to become part of an academy. And a number of the women firefighters and our first African-American fire chief in San Diego. I was on the council when he would come give public safety reports. So, I know what it means to different people to be able to serve, and how proud and how wonderful it is to be able to step up and offer what you have for the greater good, and particularly first responders. What a privilege, what an honor. And I just felt so proud to see them succeed, and to know that, Tracy Jarman was the best. She wasn't just a woman put into a position. Her firefighters, her team supported her. And that was evident. And that was even more incredibly wonderful to see the support that she got from the members of the fire rescue team in San Diego when she was selected.
We have more work to do. And just to have this conversation, I really hope that it hits the ears in our service, both on the floor and in the administrative and the leadership positions. We can be better, we can be stronger, and we can be closer and more together. Being in the Senate, and we've all been faced with COVID in the last, we're into it by a year. I'll ask you kind of a two question. What do you see as the most pressing issue in the COVID-19 front for where we stand today? What do you feel like should be our next, say, 2 or 3 priorities? And then for you as a Senate leader, how has this altered the last year of your leadership and working within the Capitol?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll take, I think, the first question. I think the priorities before us are going to continue to be how we're taking care of working families, those with lower incomes, those who are vulnerable, small businesses that are struggling to keep their doors open. We've been busy since January. It's usually not a busy time in Sacramento, January, February, first of a 2-year session. But the pandemic has really highlighted in a very real and visible way the inequities, as well as, the issues that faced or Californians are confronting. It's a unique opportunity, though, to address inequities at the core. And I'm talking about things like access to health care, including PPE, testing, vaccines, access to telehealth, sick leave, broadband. We're certainly working hard to get teachers and kids safely back into the classroom, something that is huge when you deal with inequities and access to opportunity, providing schools with resources, support that they need to make that happen. Certainly, we've dealt with renters, evictions release, small landlords, support to pay mortgages, stimulus release for low-income Californians, and relief for small businesses. We've expanded the Cal EITC. That's an incredible program, above and beyond what we thought we'd be able to do. Last year, of course, in 2020, we did SB 1383, which allows up to 12 weeks of family leave, including those who are caring for a family member who's sick or with COVID-19. Now, on a separate note, and apart from family leave, we passed last year 10 paid sick days for workers last year, and we just this year extended that through September. So we have been incredibly busy. And on the local level, each district up and down the state, my district team has been assisting with EDD unemployment claims. We've solved more than 1,800 cases closed. It's been the hugest issue dealing with unemployment and folks who've lost their jobs through no fault of their own. So, those are the kind of priorities. Now, as a leader, dealing with the impacts of, the Senate leader, the pro tem, the practical challenges of COVID-19 and continuing to operate, I would say that, again, I'm going to go back to the issue, and the word communication has been key. And I've learned during this pandemic that it necessitates more communication, not less. Our work has clearly been different. No more in-person meetings, in-person events, in-person town halls, those things that we elected officials kind of live for. But the key is that we're still doing all of those things, just virtually, like you and I today. It has taken flexibility, some innovation, and certainly patience. The virtual nature of the work has really opened up our legislative process, making it more accessible to the public, actually, which is, I guess I would say, the silver lining. But I would leave you with this. If COVID had struck 30 years ago, I can't imagine the impacts that we'd be feeling a year later. The disruption to our economy, governing daily lives, would pale in comparison if it occurred in 1990 or even 2000, before we had the technology, I think, and the innovation to really work through it. So it's just been constantly pivoting.
As a firefighter, and a member of the firefighter union, we negotiate our contracts and we do that. But I also have a lot of family members that don't work in public service and work in the private sector. And I want to thank you and your colleagues in the Senate and the Assembly and the governor for the protections that our political advocates, our elected officials put in place for the spectrum of workers in California and Californians, the sick leave, the ability to care for a loved one. And you kind of touched on it, Toni, that it's a super big deal. And the leadership that's been shown, I feel like each of us as a Californian, I have a debt of gratitude and thanks for how we're coming through this and the difficulties of it. And that leads us right into the fire season. And you have been instrumental with the firefighters in wildfire prevention, response, funding. We could have spent 2 hours talking about diversity and inclusion and COVID. And those are two huge, weighty problems that we're facing. And then we have wildfire, which is equally as weighty there. You did something for firefighters a few years ago that I think most don't really remember, and it was Senate Bill 1086. And the importance of that bill from recognizing the latency period of line of duty cancer. Number one, I want to thank you for that. Just kind of, if you can go back in time, your thought process in allowing yourself to be involved in carrying our torch.
Well, it was an incredibly important bill. And I got to say, it was really incredible and great working with you on that. I think it's pretty near impossible to quantify the value of our incredible firefighters, because the truth is, each and every one is invaluable. You put your lives on the line every single day. And this fire season that has become year round, it was definitely front page news and television news when we lost a firefighter in any of these fires. I don't care what part of the state it was. I was in San Diego on the city council when we had the fires in 2003 and 2007, which sort of was the unfortunate cutting edge of what was to come in the rest of California. And I remember firefighters coming from all over the state to help us. And, sacrifice barely scratches the surface of what firefighters have had to do. And each day they leave home, I think we're more mindful now than ever before about what it might mean for them not to be able to return home. So I think it's, it's because of firefighters that we still have redwoods that touch the sky. We still have farms that continue to produce food. We are the food basket of the world here in California. And that many of our homes still stand. I will never forget, I just visited a friend in Rancho Bernardo, the trails, where when we finally went into her neighborhood, her house was standing, but the one next door was gone, and the one next door was gone. And it was just the oddest thing to see one house standing. And I saw that up in the county of Sonoma during the glass fire and some other fires. So, we really rely on the first responders. And I think it's become very clear how invaluable. So when you look at the piece of legislation, it was really important. And now we have firefighters that have also been on the front lines confronting COVID since day one, which is why it's important, I think, that worker compensation and that whole system is adjusted to better support firefighters and their families. My dad was in World War II. He was out in the middle of the Pacific when they were doing testing of chemicals. All his life, he had issues, and finally was able to get disability 3 months before my dad died. 3 months. So when we talk about worker-related injuries, expediting access to full benefits, medical, hospital, surgery expenses, disability, death benefits, those are really important things. And I know last year, I supported SB 1159, I think it was. That was a Jerry Hill bill that extended the presumption and for COVID-related injuries. So, those are things we need to continue to pay attention to. You raised the red flag a couple of years ago around PTSD and mental health issues for firefighters as we began to see fire season year-round, which meant there was no reprieve and no respite for firefighters, always on the go to the next fire, to the next fire. And so, and now we've got pandemic fatigue, which is real. And so I think as climate change continues to really exacerbate and we realize the wildfire risk, we have to ensure that firefighters have the long-term resources, that makes our whole system stronger. And that means good benefits. It means mental health support. It means equipment. It means looking at issues facing local government, and supporting local government on issues like ingress and egress. It's not that simple. It's not just fighting fires. There's all kinds of related issues. And I want to continue to be your partner in looking at those issues, as do my colleagues.
Yes. It's interesting going forward. I have a couple of symposiums I'm going to speak at on wildfire response. And we've actually seen quite a shift to talk a lot about fire prevention. And, if you go to most firefighters prior to this, we'd all kind of, we don't want to talk about that. We put them out, we write on big red and do that. But fire prevention has become such a need and an important part. And I can say under Governor Newsom's leadership and your leadership, our legislature and the governor have done more in the last probably 3 years than ever before, especially in some of the areas of, I don't want to say easing, but some of the CEQA requirements, being able to fast track some of the prevention. What do you see going forward in the future that we can work together on prevention wise? Or is there something you feel as a senator from the 39th district of San Diego that maybe you see in your area that I'm not seeing, we should pay attention to and partner with?
I think we finally managed to shift gears from reaction to prevention, and we understand that now. We understand we've got to get ahead of it. Earlier this month, the Senate announced our blueprint for a fire-safe California. The Assembly has a different approach, but we're all trying to do the same thing. Ours is sort of a multifaceted, I would say maybe four-pronged approach to wildfire resiliency response that's going to be accomplished, I think, through the legislation and legislature and the budget process. About $550 million budget framework that would be expedited, hopefully ahead of the June budget. And that's going to be continued resources to train and deploy a fire resiliency workforce added to what, we've done in previous years, implementing modern day things like vegetation management, forest management, community hardening plans, expanding access to homeowners insurance, not necessarily your issue, but it's relevant. I think despite having an interrupted legislative session last year, we passed a budget that further enhanced the prevention piece and suppression efforts. That's, the new firefighters I've heard you talk about, seasonal firefighters, the California Conservation Corps crews, more funding, support, money for local governments to respond to public safety power shutdowns. And I will say our investor-owned utilities have a huge role to play here. And I will point to San Diego Gas and Electric in the work that they've done. Now, they have a much smaller area than, say, PG&E up here. But what they, following the fires I mentioned in 2003, 2007, they started to look more seriously at smaller grids, that can go offline as the wind conditions and Santa Ana's, those kinds of things, and to make sure that there's support in place for communities, to make sure that we have done the working with the investor-owned utility, with the county, with fire services, CAL FIRE, big part of what we do in San Diego County, to really monitor and to put those monitors in place and have the emergency center that's able to really respond. And that came out of crisis and tragedy. So in addition, it's more than $30 million for wildfire safety, reform, some of those things. So more and more, it's resources and it's money, but it's also collaboration and learning to work together. And so all kinds of things, helicopters, equipment, those things we have to continue to invest in and realize you got to keep it up to date.
It's been interesting, some of the collaborations that we've done, both with elected leaders and then industry and then environmentalists in the environmental lobby. And I think for the most part, it appears to me that we're all working together. We'll always have kind of the one or two offs, whether it's the timber industry, you can't cut everything down and sell it, or the environmental lobby, you can't save everything. There's responsible managing. And I feel like I'm seeing more of that than ever before. And it's kind of heartening, kind of going forward. It really is going to be the prevention piece. And we don't talk about it enough. But last fire season, do you realize we made it through a fire season with no or very minimal COVID impingement? That in itself, from OES, municipal departments, CAL FIRE, the legislation that was put in place to protect people, nobody's ever stopped to say that was nothing short of a miracle that we, and meaning we collectively as a team, from the governor right down to the tailboard firefighter and all the leaders in between, put systems and process and policy in place that kept people safe. I even think with the number of evacuations, we didn't have a huge COVID issue. And, that's going to be one that we collectively, Toni, you and myself as a fire service labor person, we have to repeat that for this fire season. As tough as stuff can be, there's so much for us to be thankful for. What are some of your legislative priorities that you have for the coming session, and how can we help you accomplish them?
Well, thank you. Clearly, Brian, we all want to do the best that we can by our constituents, by our state, our families. Are we perfect? No. We try things. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't. We have to pivot again and change. But, I think the thing that I want more than anything is really to reaffirm a reputation of the Senate. That is my goal for my caucus and for the Senate as a whole, as a thoughtful and responsible body of legislators. We are responsible to the public. We've taken some early budget actions to meet the most pressing needs. Again, renters, mom and pop landlords, safely reopening schools, those kinds of things, lower income families. As budget chair, Senator Skinner is going to lead us to an on-time final budget in June. I know we have multiple tiers we have to go through, and we want to continue to take responsible steps and include meaningful improvements. And we're going to have to do that with you. And we need your feedback. I, of course, have a priority to work on our housing crisis. It affects all of us. We have a situation where housing prices are very high and the cost of living is high. I want to make sure we've got 6 bills, at least at this point, that aim to provide more land use tools, flexibility to meet needs of local governments, our community partners, and to provide housing, and to yet again streamline in a way that tries to tackle the crisis quicker. I want to push back on sea level rise. That impacts your work. Sea level rise impacts communities in ways that we don't think about or understand. When a firefighter or a paramedic has to respond to a cliff that falls into the ocean in Encinitas, California, and kills 3 members of the public, that impacts public safety. That impacts first responders. When we have a rail line that is severely close to the edge of the bluffs in Del Mar, and that is the second busiest rail line. These are climate change issues related to sea level rise. I want to work on those things. I want to continue to work on issues regarding police reform to throw a broad net. I'm proud to be a joint author on SB2, which is Senator Bradford's bill, which would hold officers who engage in serious misconduct accountable. And then lastly, to the topic we've talked about a couple of different ways, I want to make sure we continue to expand access to healthcare for everyone in California. Unforeseen benefits, of the pandemic has been the expanded use of telehealth, which we need to make sure that we are trying to take advantage of a crisis to expand the services. Broadband. Now that is something that is broadband critically, and access and the ability to communicate is very important to first responders. We saw that. And so we'll continue to work on all of those things. But I think it really, overall, I want to know that we are considered to be responsible partners, seeking out solutions together to our most vexing problems. And I know that there's no limit to what we can do if we work together and if we're open to possibilities that are different than what we might have looked at before.
Senate President Pro Tem Toni Atkins, my friend, a colleague, I so appreciate the chance just to sit down and talk. One issue we didn't even get to hit was your leadership on Prop 19 and securing a funding source for special districts that were underfunded in the state of California. It's a two-piece process, as we have to work on the funding or the augmentation piece of it. You were instrumental in that. Your leadership, probably for me, that was I got to see firsthand legislative leadership at its finest. And it was just, I can never thank you enough being able to partner with you, being able to work alongside you, be guided by, and just partner not only Toni with you, but with the Senate, the Assembly, and ultimately the voters.
I would have to say we had the best branding possible. We had firefighters. Without your leadership, without your role played in that, we would not have been successful. So again, it comes back to partnerships and how we use the resources we have. And frankly, the brand of firefighter is one of the best brands available, particularly as we have faced the wildfires. So it wouldn't have happened without you and without your members. So look forward to finding other ways to partner.
I just want to thank you, Toni. I know you're busy and taking the time out of your schedule, and with COVID and everything that's surrounding us, just the chance to partner with you and work with you for me has been very fulfilling.
With you as well, Brian. And thank your entire team. You have a great team.
I want to thank Senator Toni Atkins for being with us on this edition of the CPF Fire Wire. I want to thank our listeners, and I would ask you to look forward to the next edition of the Fire Wire. And with that, everybody have a great day and a great week. Thank you so much.
You can find CPF Fire Wire at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, or wherever you find podcasts. Be sure to subscribe so you'll never miss an episode. You can also find CPF Fire Wire at the CPF website, www.cpf.org, and on the CPF YouTube page. We're always interested in getting your feedback, comments, and criticism. Tell us what you'd like to hear about. Drop us a line, info@cpf.org. CPF Firewire is a production of California Professional Firefighters. Our producer is Carol Wills. Our engineer is Matt McDermott. Please join us next month for another edition of CPF Firewire.